first time I watched Jonny Quest, I was completely spellbound. I still vividly remember that feeling, my heart racing unconsciously, leaning closer to the screen every time Jonny and the gang plunged into danger. To me, back then, Jonny Quest was a true adventure, a journey to strange lands where science fiction and peril merged in terrifying ways. Years later, when I returned to look closer, I realized the truth behind the scenes was even stranger than fiction. Those explosions on screen weren't just for show, they were crafted from real models precisely calculated to be destroyed in a single take. And what about the military designs that once prompted the FBI to pay a visit? It turns out they were distilled from public scientific journals. Yet they were so realistic they left the adults of that era deeply unsettled. Today, we're peeling back the curtain once again on the strangest, darkest mysteries from the Jonny Quest archives. Let's get started. 1. Unfiltered Danger, animation or action thriller.
Now that's a cue if ever I heard one.
Released in 1964, Jonny Quest appeared in a familiar landscape of American animation. Talking animals, harmless chases and conflicts always resolved with a laugh. Then, Jonny Quest arrived and did everything differently. The show didn't stop at fun thrills. Jonny was sometimes taken hostage. Race Bannon frequently faced real hand-to-hand combat, and villains were defeated right in front of the audience. What's remarkable is that all these images were broadcast openly by the American Broadcasting Company in 1964 during family primetime. Back then, the concept of age ratings barely existed, and Jonny Quest was viewed as an adventure series, not a shocking program. What about you? Is there a specific scene in Jonny Quest? 2. The FBI and the two realistic designs.
Your food, Dr. Zinn.
You brainless fool! Get out! And if you ever come in here again without knocking, I'll have you flogged. Now get out!
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Do you still remember the moment when the TV screen was covered in a cold blue colour, and Dr. Zinn's underground base appeared as if we had just stepped into another world? For many viewers back then, those laser drawings control panels packed with buttons and underground spaces gave a feeling of being very real. But few people know that behind those frames is a special story. The technical designs by artist Doug Wildey were built to such a level that they even caught the attention of the FBI. According to interview materials, the FBI contacted the production team to inquire about the origins of many ideas, from metal-cutting lasers, multi-level underground bases, to surveillance and remote control devices. When asked directly, Doug Wildey simply replied, "I didn't access any source materials. What he drew was the result of reasoning from science and technical logic." And what about you? When you think back to Jonny Quest, which image first comes to mind in your memory? 3. The greatest disruptive person of colour in the history of American animation.
Oh, slow, please! Real slow!
Sing, sing, salabim.
Perhaps you once tried to listen carefully when Haji quietly murmured those incantations. However, Haji was never a harmless character. In reality, he is the greatest disruptor in the history of American animation. In 1964, when Jonny Quest premiered, American television was still mainly revolving around white characters, and placing an Indian origin boy in a central position was a highly risky decision. Because of that, Hanna-Barbera had to cloak Haji in the guise of magic, turning his intelligence into a form of mystical ability that was easier to swallow for the majority. But over time, the perception of Haji has changed. Many researchers point out that Haji did not appear just to serve as background. He is the emotional balancing factor. In an era when racial diversity was rarely shown, Haji brought audiences the feeling of seeing a part of the real world present in a famous adventure series. 4. The Ghost Film, hidden right in the classic opening sequence. Do you still remember the scene where the hovercraft glides confidently and then closes in on the plane right in the opening? Perhaps there was a moment you had to lean toward the screen, both curious and delighted by an image that was just too awesome. But the interesting thing is, that frame was not actually created specifically for Jonny Quest. It came from another Hanna-Barbera project called Jack Armstrong, All-American Boy, a series that has been forgotten. The production team chose to reuse them for the intro of Jonny Quest, even keeping almost the entire layout intact. The remarkable thing is that for many decades, no one noticed this. Audiences accepted that opening as a natural part of the Quest world modern and very true to adventure. In the context of 1960s television, when the concept of image copyright or fandom did not yet exist, this method was seen as efficient and caused little controversy. 5. The decoder ring, the tool for brainwashing children.
Johnny flashed back his answer with his PF magic ring. Coming! He ran like the wind. Lucky he was wearing his PF Flyers, the action shoes.
Do you still remember the feeling of holding Jonny Quest's decoder ring, then bending down to slip on a pair of PF Flyers shoes? Just by rotating the ring face correctly, the whole world suddenly disappeared. Before our eyes was the secret base, the place where humanity's fate was waiting to be saved. Back then, we believed absolutely. Believed that Jonny Quest was living in those feet. But when we grew up, we realised there was no secret code waiting at all. After all those ring rotations, the final message only showed up briefly. We're PFs. If we just call that advertising, it might be too simplistic. 1960s television borrowed children's absolute belief in Jonny Quest to make them want to own those shoes. Researchers call that the early stage of emotional marketing and behavioural influence. When there were no legal barriers, studios and brands cleverly tied courage and heroic aspirations to a very specific consumer item. There's a quote from someone in the industry back then that I always remember. He said, "We're not selling shoes, we're selling the feeling of being Jonny Quest." 6. The Jonny Quest, card game that disappeared as if it never existed. I once thought Jonny Quest only existed on Friday nights in front of the TV screen, where every adventure began when the theme music played. Until one day, I discovered that in 1965, Milton Bradley released a Jonny Quest card set with 42 cards along with simple rules. But do you remember it? Almost no one does. In fact, that game was never reprinted and then it vanished. This card set was Hanna-Barbera's ambition when they wanted this brand to step out into real life and become a multi-platform brand. It's just a pity that at that time, the market and audience were not yet ready. And so the card set failed. But today, that very failure makes it special. Owning a Jonny Quest card set now feels like holding a piece of television relic in your hand. And what about you? Have you ever heard of this Jonny Quest card set? Or is this the first time you've learned of its existence? 7. Around the World in 26 episodes.
Wherever it is, it's beautiful.
Try to forget Scooby-Doo for a moment because Jonny Quest is completely different. Each episode is like a brand new journey. From Egypt, India, Nepal, then to the North Pole or the Andes. Almost no reusing of settings. The magical thing is Jonny Quest brought a global vision. At a time when most children's programs were still stuck in suburban spaces. When watching the show, you were truly experiencing a journey around the world. You travelled with Johnny and Haji to distant lands that most young viewers back then had never seen or even heard of. With just 26 episodes, the Quest family created a world far larger and more majestic than what many other series achieved in hundreds of episodes. 8. Voice actors, haunted by death.
Boy, I hope that door holds for a while.
Do you still remember those gasping breaths or the voice-cracking screams in the dark tomb? That chilling realism made us kids back then feel the heat of danger right in front of the TV screen. The truth behind those frames was a heavy atmosphere where voice actors like Vic Perrin or Don Messick had to gamble with their personal emotions. To meet the strict demands for realism, they were forced to simulate suffocation to the most authentic level. There were recording sessions where when the signal light went off, the actors were left trapped in extreme psychological tension. They screamed as if standing in the middle of a real disaster where death could strike at any moment. One technician still hasn't forgotten the moment Don Messick had to stop with a stunned look in his eyes. He bitterly exclaimed, "What the hell are we doing here? I feel like I just took one step into the other world." That haunting sacrifice created a different emotional layer for Jonny Quest, a harsh threshold that no other contemporary animated series dared to touch. 9. The Lizard Man Incident, Fear of Mutated Creatures.
Where are you, boy? Bandit!
Surely you still remember the moment the water surface rippled, then half human, half lizard figures slowly rose from the darkness. For kids in the 60s, those images haunted in a way that's hard to name. But the story behind it makes us pause even longer. During testing and scene building for Jonny Quest, the team once designed the creature using thick materials to create the feeling that this creature really existed in real life. Those experiments, according to people in the crew who later recounted, went beyond what was suitable for broadcast, forcing the producers to cut and soften the images before airing on TV. The audience's reaction also says a lot. Letters of feedback and complaints from parents surged. And so, a boundary was set. The most haunting segments never appeared in the official broadcast version. 10. The Truth About Race Bannon.
Not nice to litter like that. Now, don't you know you're not supposed to play with knives?
Every time Race Bannon stepped into the frame, the atmosphere seemed to drop. I remember that feeling very clearly. Race appeared, and we knew things were no longer simple. And if you pay close attention, you'll notice Race almost never drew his gun to intimidate. When he acted, he observed, chose his position, and struck immediately. Race behaved like a professional agent and still accepted it to protect those behind him. That presence made Jonny Quest different. Here, the hero didn't stand in front of the camera to talk about tolerance. Instead, the film quietly showed a harsher world where sometimes adults had to do things they weren't proud of. Perhaps as kids, we just saw Race as cool. But he wasn't a perfect model. He was written to reflect an unspoken truth that responsibility sometimes comes with choices, and not every time is there a way that's right for everyone. And what about you? When you think of Race Bannon, do you remember an action hero or a quiet adult carrying the dark side of the world so the kids could be safe? 11. Dr. Zinn, the villain who hijacked the airwaves and the ghost of two voices.
What do you make of it, Dr. Quest?
I don't know, but wherever it comes from, it's the result of a brilliant mind.
You'll find out, Dr. Quest.
Surely you still remember the chilling sensation running down your spine every time Dr. Zinn appeared, making you just want to turn off the TV immediately. However, that fear was no accident but a deliberate arrangement by the producers. The character Zinn was voiced by Vic Perrin, the same person who was the haunting control voice in the horror series The Outer Limits. Imagine this the night before you heard that voice warning about alien invasion. The next night, the exact same tone was plotting to conquer the world. This crossover created a terrifying psychological effect, as if a single dark entity was truly taking control of your home TV. The interesting thing is Perrin didn't use any sound effects at all. A Hanna-Barbera producer once affirmed Zinn doesn't need bizarre costumes or crazy slogans. Using the same voice for two cultural icons elevated Dr. Zinn beyond the framework of an ordinary animated character. 12. The Dog Bandit, the Trojan horse in the heart of Johnny Quest.
How do you like that?
Do you still remember that bulldog with black circles around his eyes like a mask? Every time Bandit waddled in the atmosphere, instantly softened. Sometimes just one confused glance from Bandit was enough to make us burst out laughing. But Bandit wasn't created just for fun. Bandit was designed to be the easiest to produce, from plastic models, lunchboxes to stickers and stuffed toys. In a high production cost series like Johnny Quest, Bandit played an extremely important role, connecting emotionally with children and saving the economic equation for the entire project. And the result was clear. Bandit quickly became the most beloved character, while also being the top-selling merchandise of the entire series. 13. The Harsh Truth, when the show was too good to survive.
Well, you're talking about one of my all-time favorite shows, which apparently is not handled right the way they've been doing it recently.
In the 1960s, most television animated shows were made on low budgets, reusing settings and repeating movements to maximize profits. But Johnny Quest was different. The Quest family followed a completely different path. Each episode required countless detailed hand-drawn frames, entirely new settings, almost no reuse. That alone caused production costs to skyrocket. For Hanna-Barbera, this was a huge burden. And for the American Broadcasting Company, the financial equation became too difficult to continue. Even though the show was highly praised artistically, the network still couldn't find a way to offset the ever-growing costs. The result was that Johnny Quest stopped at 26 episodes before the project was terminated. Artists who worked at the studio later recounted that the budget pressure at the time was so heavy they had to argue over every single frame to preserve the film's sense of realism. And that very thing created Johnny Quest's position today. A short series not dragged out over many seasons, but leaving a deep impression. 14. Inventions stolen from the future. Have you ever dreamed of wearing the Quest family's jetpack? Amid a forest of magic wands, Johnny Quest stood out as frighteningly realistic. But the shocking truth is Doug Wildey stole the future to build that world. He regularly visited newsstands, flipping through every page of Popular Science and Popular Mechanics to find designs still in the testing phase by the US military. Every detail was so accurate that a later aeronautical engineer had to admit the astonishing technical precision in the film. Wildey borrowed what was about to happen and brought it to TV before it became reality. That's what experts call the science of 10 minutes from now. While most people were just looking for simple entertainment, Wildey wanted kids to believe all of this could completely happen. Bringing real technology into animation was a genius but highly risky move, requiring every stroke to strictly follow physical logic. And that very boldness turned Johnny Quest into a timeless monument ahead of its era. 15. Johnny Quest, the lone invader of all three television empires. Do you still remember those weekend moments when the call, "Stuffman, Stuffman, do you read me?" rang out? Oh my God, just hearing that was enough to know it was Johnny Quest time. And the strange thing is, years passed, though we changed channels, changed houses, changed entire phases of life. Johnny Race Bannon and the Dog Bandit seem to always be there. This is a very rare case in television history. This film was once broadcast on all three major networks, fierce competitors with each other. It started with the American Broadcasting Company in 1964, then moved to CBS 1967 to 1970, and then appeared again on NBC in the early 70s. Just hearing it sounds absurd, right? In an industry tightly bound by copyright that was almost unimaginable. Someone once compared Johnny Quest to a band that released only one album, but that album was so good that all three major record labels wanted to own it. Just 26 episodes, no more, yet enough to hold audiences from one network to another. A former NBC program director once said, a very true sentence, everyone wanted Johnny Quest. It always brought ratings no matter how many times it had been rerun. 16. Dr. Benton Quest and the Secret of the Mid-Series Voice Swap.
Dr. Benton Quest is continually called upon by World Council to use his advanced intellect and amazing inventions for the betterment of mankind.
Surely you still remember Dr. Quest, the man who always spoke in a calm, steady voice, as if every danger in life could be solved with an equation. And perhaps, like me back then, you never wondered why did his voice sound different in a few episodes. It turns out that wasn't in the script. It was because of a very television problem Dr. Quest had, two voices. Initially, this character was voiced by John Stevenson. But the issue arose immediately his voice was too similar to Race Bannon's. In rushed scenes, the two overlapped and audiences had trouble telling who was speaking. Sounds trivial, right? But for Hanna-Barbera, it was a matter of life and death. And so they did something very bold. They changed Dr. Quest's voice. Don Messick stepped in. His voice was warmer, thicker, carrying the quality of a real father rather than a cold scientist. Kids back then hardly noticed. But we still watched, still believed, still held our breath with every word. But industry insiders knew exactly what was happening. Messick changed the entire emotional tone of the character. Dr. Quest was no longer just the one who knew everything but became a true father. The production team had to review every scene, every line of dialogue, so the transition wouldn't break the emotional flow and go unnoticed by audiences. 17. Dr. Zinn, the perfect villain, built from James Bond characters. When Dr. Zinn appeared, what did you feel? I remember very clearly the atmosphere suddenly grew heavy. But what made Dr. Zinn completely different from those come-and-go villains was the sense of threat he carried. He just had to appear, and kids would scream in terror. Vic Perrin, the voice actor for Dr. Zinn, possessed a voice so cold it sounded like metal scraping together, slow, even and certain. On top of that, Dr. Zinn didn't need flashy costumes or crazy slogans to prove his power. He was built very clearly in the mould of early James Bond villains, cold, rational, and always with backup plans. Many filmmakers and critics later pointed out something very interesting. Dr. Zinn didn't feel cartoonish at all. He wasn't exaggerated, wasn't made silly for kids to laugh at. On the contrary, Zinn was steadfast, persistent, and terrifying in a very adult way. 18. Robot Spy, when the Steel Spider became an eternal nightmare. Perhaps even now you still remember the cold shiver running down your spine when that black spider rolled slowly across the Quest family yard, its glowing red eyes scanning the screen as if seeing right through you. But the scary part was, it didn't lunge wildly, it just advanced steadily like a machine that already knew the prey's fate. Whether you stood still or ran, it would appear at the right moment. In reality, that spider wasn't a monster in the usual sense. It was the earliest idea of fear of technology on children's television, where the threat was machinery carrying out orders. Johnny Quest planted in an entire generation's mind a lingering question. What will happen when technology no longer needs humans to distinguish right from wrong? 19. The adoption of Haji in Kolkata. I once held my breath when I saw Haji Singh save Johnny, then unconsciously smiled when realizing he was becoming more and more important. At first, he was just a silent companion, but the longer we watched, we felt more Haji was not outside this family. And the truth is exactly that. In the world of Jonny Quest, Haji didn't just travel with Johnny, he was adopted by Dr. Benton Quest as a son. In 1964, the American television landscape was still full of white images. A US scientist adopting an orphaned boy from India was a very bold choice for animation at that time. What's valuable is that Jonny Quest didn't turn Haji into a background character. He didn't stand behind. He was in the family. Haji was listened to, trusted, and many times he was the one who kept the whole group standing firm against danger. Therefore, when looking back, many fans and analysts agree on one point: the decision to adopt Haji is the deepest humanistic value of the entire series. It brought children back then a very different family image, where connection didn't come from blood ties or skin colour, but from love, courage and mutual respect. And what about you? When you think of Haji, what do you remember most? 20. One season that packed an entire universe. Surely you still remember the moment your heart beat faster when Race Bannon shouted, "Aim at that tree, boys," right before a giant creature suddenly charged out of the darkness. With just 26 episodes, Jonny Quest crammed in almost everything imaginable: robot spiders, leftover Nazi pilots after the war, fake Yetis, giant sea monsters, secret bases, mad experiments. While many contemporary animations kept recycling familiar motifs, the Quest family constantly changed themes, enemies, and even worlds. The most admirable thing is how the film was made. No reusing plots, no recycling settings. Every week was a completely new story, new villains, new dangers, and a new land to explore. Perhaps that's why Jonny Quest still feels so satisfying in memory. Not long, not dragged out, but every episode made viewers feel they had just experienced a complete adventure. And what about you? Among the dangers in Jonny Quest, what do you remember most? The monsters, the robots, or Race Bannon's tense shout right before the danger struck? Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, share and subscribe so you won't miss our next videos. Leave your thoughts in the comments below. I'd love to hear from you. Let us know in the comments which movie you want us to cover in the next video. See you in the next video.